It's been 36 years since hundreds of people gathered in a Florida pasture, greeting each other, hugging, singing, and banging pans to celebrate a murder. It was a moment that had been brewing for years, and it brought with it a collective sigh of relief because the life taken on January 24th, 1989 was, in the opinion of most, the life of a monster. "Burn, Bundy! Burn!" they chanted as word spread that Theodore Robert Bundy, one of America's most infamous serial killers, had died in the electric chair at Florida State Prison at 7:16 a.m. that day. Bundy's last breath marked the first moment those affected by his horrific killing spree, which spanned the western United States and Florida, could breathe easy. On January 4th, 1974, Karen Sparks was asleep in her basement apartment when she was bludgeoned and sexually assaulted with a metal rod her attacker took from her bed frame. The attack left Sparks, an 18-year-old dancer and student at the University of Washington, in a coma for 10 days, but she survived. She suffered severe brain damage and reportedly never regained memory of the attack. Less than a month later, 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy was abducted from her apartment during the early morning hours of February 1. Her bed was made and nothing appeared disturbed, so her roommate assumed Healy was elsewhere. But then her parents called to say she never showed up for dinner that night. Healy's loved ones noted that she was not one to make up her bed, and blood was found on her pillow and bottom sheet. Blood was also found on her nightgown, which had been hung in her closet. A pillowcase, top sheet, and outfit she wore that day were missing from Healy's room, and investigators later determined someone had removed Healy's nightgown, dressed her in the clothes, made the bed, wrapped Healy in her bed's top sheet, and carried her out of the house. After Healy vanished, young college women quickly began disappearing. On March 12th, Donna Gail Manson left her dorm room to go to a jazz concert on campus at the Evergreen State College in Olympia. But Manson, 19, never made it to the show. On April 17th, Susan Elaine Rancourt went missing while on her way to her dorm after meeting with advisors at Central Washington State College in Ellensburg. Then, on May 6th, Roberta Kathleen Parks left her dorm with plans to have coffee with friends at the Memorial Union at Oregon State University in Corvallis. But she too never arrived. On June 1st, 22-year-old Brenda Carol Ball vanished after she left the Flame Tavern in Berrien. She had hoped to get a ride home with a musician, but he was going the other way, and she was last seen in the bar's parking lot talking to a brown-haired man with his arm in a sling, witnesses said. On June 11th, UW student Jorgen Hawkins vanished while walking down a brightly lit alley between her boyfriend's dorm and the sorority house where she lived. Then on July 14th, 2 women were abducted from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in Issaquah. Janice Ann Ott, a 23-year-old probation caseworker at the King County Juvenile Court, was last seen leaving the beach with an attractive young man. About 4 hours later, Denise Marie Naslund, 19, left a picnic at the beach to use the restroom and never came back. Though there was at first little to go on, detectives from the King County and Seattle police departments were becoming increasingly concerned by the growing number of missing women. The cases had little in common, but all the women were young, attractive white college students with long hair parted in the middle. 2 women attending Central Washington State College, from where Rancourt had vanished, told investigators they were approached by a man wearing an arm sling who asked if they could help him carry a load of books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. The first incident occurred 3 nights before Rancourt disappeared, and the second happened on the night she was last seen alive. The morning after Hawkins vanished, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a criminalist scoured the alleyway for clues, but found nothing. Police appealed to the public for help, and witnesses came forward saying a man with a leg cast who was on crutches was seen in an alley of a nearby dorm and struggling to carry a briefcase. A woman noted that man approached her and asked for help carrying the case to his car, which she said was a light brown Volkswagen Beetle. Following the disappearances of Ott and Naslund, 5 women who were also at the beach that day told detectives they had been approached by an attractive young man who introduced himself as Ted. They said he spoke with an accent described as either Canadian or British and wore a white tennis outfit, had his left arm in a sling, and asked for their help unloading a sailboat from his tan or bronze-colored Volkswagen Beetle. 4 of the women refused to help, and the one woman who agreed to help accompanied him to his car, but fled when she saw there was no sailboat. 3 additional witnesses said Ott had agreed to help the man. The number of young female hitchhikers dropped sharply and the pressures mounted to make an arrest. After posting flyers in the Seattle area, King County Police were able to create a composite sketch of the suspect and his car. It was printed in newspapers and broadcast on television. Detectives were bombarded with tips, receiving up to 200 per day during their sweeping investigation. Several would prove to be essential in catching the person responsible. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. Though his father's identity has never been officially determined, his birth certificate assigned paternity to Air Force veteran Lloyd Marshall. Bundy was raised for the first 3 years of his life in Philadelphia by his maternal grandparents Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, and believed them to be his parents and his actual mother to be his older sister. He eventually learned the truth, telling biographers and reporters Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth he realized who his mother was when he found his birth certificate. Bundy's grandfather was said to be a violent and racist man who took out his temper on his wife and the family. Bundy recalled to Michaud and Ainsworth an instance where he threw his daughter Julia down the stairs for oversleeping. From a young age, Bundy's behavior disturbed those around him, including Julia, who said she once woke from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives taken from the kitchen and smiling Bundy standing nearby. Bundy moved with his mother from Philadelphia to Washington when he was 4. They lived with her cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, where Cowell met hospital cook Johnny Culpepper Bundy at a singles night at church. They married later that year, and Johnny Bundy formally adopted Cowell's young son. The couple had 4 more children, but Johnny Bundy reportedly always tried to make his adoptive son feel like his own, though Bundy remained distant. His accounts of life in Tacoma to his many biographers varied, but Bundy recalled drunkenly roaming the neighborhood and searching for pictures of naked women in other people's trash, as well as undraped windows where he could watch actual women undressing. Though he likened himself to a lone wolf, Bundy's high school classmates said he was well known and liked. He often skied and pursued the hobby by stealing gear and forging lift tickets. Bundy was arrested twice while in high school on suspicion of burglary and auto theft. The incidents were expunged from his record when he turned 18. Bundy studied at the University of Puget Sound for a year before transferring to the University of Washington in 1966 to study Chinese. He became romantically involved with a classmate, but she ended their relationship because she believed he was not mature enough and lacked ambition. By that point, Bundy had dropped out of college and worked minimum-wage jobs while volunteering at the Seattle office of Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign. Bundy traveled to Colorado, Arkansas, and Philadelphia, where he spent 1 semester at Temple University. He moved back to Washington in 1969 and met Elizabeth Klupfer, a divorcee who worked as a secretary at the University of Washington. They began what would become an on-again, off-again relationship that lasted years. Bundy re-enrolled at the University of Washington as a psychology major, and in 1971, he took a job at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center, where he met Ann Rule. After he graduated in 1972, Bundy joined Governor Daniel Evans' re-election campaign and went on to become an assistant to Ross Davis, chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. The following year, he was accepted into Seattle University's law school, mostly thanks to the letters of recommendation written by Evans, Davis, and several professors. He rekindled his relationship with his classmate he dated in 1966, and the pair discussed getting engaged, but he abruptly broke off all contact with her in January 1974, later saying in an interview he wanted to prove to himself he could have married her. It was at this time, on January 4th, that Sparks was assaulted. That year, Bundy worked as assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission. There, he wrote a pamphlet for women on preventing rape. He also worked in Olympia at the Department of Emergency Services, a state government agency that was involved in the search for the women who were going missing. There, he met and dated Carol Ann Boone, a divorced mother of two. By April, as more women began disappearing, Bundy stopped going to law classes. Though King County Police were made aware of Bundy and the many similarities that existed between he and the profile of the suspect, including owning a tan Volkswagen Beetle, investigators at first thought it unlikely that a law student involved in politics who had no adult criminal record could be behind the crimes. On September 6th, hunters discovered the remains of Ott and Naslund near a service road in Issaquah, 2 miles east of Lake Sammamish State Park. By then, Bundy had been accepted into the University of Utah Law School and moved to Utah, where more women would go missing. Nancy Wilcox was just 16 when she disappeared on October 2nd from Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City. She was reportedly last seen in a Volkswagen Beetle. Melissa Ann Smith, 17, was last seen alive leaving a pizza parlor in Midvale, another Salt Lake City suburb, on October 18th. Smith, the daughter of Midvale's police chief, had planned to attend a slumber party the night she went missing. Smith's naked body was found by hikers in a mountainous area 9 days after she went missing. Investigators believed she may have remained alive for up to 7 days after she had left the pizza parlor. Laura Ann Aime, also 17, disappeared after leaving a cafe in Leahy on October 31st. Aime's nude body was found by hikers in American Fork Canyon on Thanksgiving. Both Smith and Aime were beaten, raped, sodomized, and strangled with nylon stockings. On November 8th, Carol Duranch told police she was at Fashion Place Mall in Murray, less than a mile from where Smith had last been seen alive, when she was approached by a man who claimed to be a cop. Identifying himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department, the man told Duranch someone had tried breaking into her car and asked her to come into the station to file a complaint. Duranch went with the man, but when she pointed out he wasn't driving to the police station, he pulled to the shoulder and tried handcuffing her. During their struggle, the man put both handcuffs on one of her wrists, and Duranch was able to open the car door and escape. That night, 17-year-old Deborah Jean Kent vanished after leaving a theater production at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, about 20 miles from Murray. The school's drama teacher and a student told police an unknown man asked each of them to identify a car in the parking lot. Another teen said they saw the same man pacing in the back of the auditorium. The drama teacher again spotted the man before the play ended. Police discovered a key outside the auditorium that they later determined could unlock the handcuffs forced on Duranch. In November, Bundy's on-again, off-again girlfriend Klepfer again called police in King County, Washington, after reading about women disappearing in towns near Salt Lake City where Bundy now lived. Detectives interviewed her in detail, as Bundy had risen on the list of potential suspects in those Washington cases. By 1975, women in Colorado began vanishing in the same vein as the victims in Washington and Utah. Karen Eileen Campbell disappeared while walking down a brightly lit hallway between the elevator and her room at the Wildwood Inn in Snowmass Village on January 12th. The 23-year-old registered nurse's nude body was found in a snowbank a month later, not far from the inn. She had suffered a blow to her head and she had suffered deep cuts to her body. Julie Cunningham, 26, went missing not far from her apartment on March 15th. The Vail ski instructor had planned to get dinner with a friend, but she never arrived. That same month, forestry students working on Taylor Mountain in Washington discovered the remains of Healy, Rancourt, Parks, and Ball. On April 6th, Denise Lynn Oliverson vanished while riding her bicycle to her parents' house in Grand Junction near the border of Colorado and Utah. Her bike and sandals were found under a viaduct near a railroad bridge. 1 month later, 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver was abducted from Alameda Junior High School in Pocatello, Idaho. In mid-May, 3 of Bundy's Washington State DES co-workers, including Carol Ann Boone, visited him in Salt Lake City. In early June, he visited Klupfer in Seattle, where they discussed getting married. Klupfer didn't tell Bundy she had been talking with police, nor did Bundy mention he was still seeing Boone as well as a woman at his law school. On June 28th, Susan Curtis went missing while on campus at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Later that summer, Bundy was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In Washington state, investigators tried to make sense of the data they had and input all known factors about the suspect into a huge primitive computer and came up with 4 separate lists. One of the names included on all 4 lists was Ted Bundy. He was also at the top of the list authorities manually compiled. As investigators narrowed in on Bundy, they received a call from Utah. Bundy had been arrested. Bundy was arrested by a Utah Highway Patrol officer in Granger who noticed him driving slowly through a residential area in the early hours of August 16, 1975. Bundy took off, but the officer managed to make him stop and search the car, finding a ski mask, a pantyhose mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other items known to be used during a burglary. The officer also noticed the front passenger seat had been removed and put into the back of the car. Though Bundy claimed the ski mask was for skiing, he found the handcuffs in a dumpster, and the rest of the items could be found in any household. An investigator recognized that Bundy and his car matched the description of the suspect and vehicle used in the attempted abduction of Duranch. Police were able to charge him with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in the Duranch case. He was freed after his parents paid his $15,000 bail. On March 1, 1976, Bundy was found guilty of kidnapping and assault after waiving his right to a jury. He was sentenced to a minimum of 1 year to a maximum of 15 years in Utah State Prison. In October, he was charged with the Colorado murder of Karen Campbell. He was extradited to Aspen in January 1977 to stand trial in her killing, but Bundy had other plans. After one failed attempted escape in Utah, Bundy succeeded in breaking out of the Garfield County Jail in Aspen, where he was to have a preliminary hearing. After declaring he was representing himself, Bundy asked to go to the facility's law library, where Bundy jumped from a second-story window. He spent 6 days on the run before police pulled over the car he had stolen. Bundy again devised a plan to break out of the jail, despite the case against him seeming to be deteriorating. He found a copy of a detailed floor plan of the jail, saved $500 in cash that was smuggled in by visitors, including Carol Ann Boone, acquired a hacksaw blade from other inmates and lost 35 pounds. He then sawed a hole in his cell's ceiling and wriggled through to the crawl space above. After several practice runs, Bundy made his escape on deck, 1977. Jailers would not realize he was gone until the following day, giving Bundy a 17-hour head start. A passing motorist gave him a ride 60 miles to Vail, and from there he caught a bus to Denver, where he took a flight to Chicago. From Chicago, he traveled to Michigan, then to Atlanta, Georgia, and then finally to Tallahassee, Florida. There, he snuck into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University during the early hours of Super Bowl Sunday on January 15, 1978. Within minutes, he bludgeoned 21-year-old Margaret Bowman as she slept and then strangled her with a nylon stocking. He next attacked sorority sister Lisa Levy, 20, beating her unconscious before mutilating and sexually assaulting her body. Bundy went on to attack Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, both of whom survived but were viciously beaten. Investigators said the attacks took place in a total of less than 15 minutes, within earshot of more than 30 people who heard nothing. After leaving the sorority house, Bundy broke into the apartment of FSU student Cheryl Thomas. He dislocated her shoulder, fractured her jaw, and fractured her skull in 5 places. The attack left Thomas permanently deaf and her equilibrium damaged. On February 8, Bundy drove a stolen FSU van 150 miles to Jacksonville, where he approached 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter, whose father was the Jacksonville Police Department's chief of detectives. Bundy claimed to be a fireman, but he fled when Parmenter's brother arrived and approached. He backtracked 60 miles to Lake City, where he abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach. Her body would be found 7 weeks later under an abandoned hog shed. On February 15, Bundy was stopped by Pensacola police officer David Lee in a stolen Volkswagen Beetle. Bundy kicked Lee and took off running, but Lee eventually subdued him. Inside the bug were 3 IDs belonging to female FSU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen TV. As Lee transported Bundy to jail, Bundy told him, "I wish you had killed me." Lee was unaware he had in his custody one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. On July 24th, Judge Edward D. Cowart of Dade County Circuit Court sentenced Bundy to death. However, Judge Cowart had a few final words for Bundy, and shockingly, it appeared as if he was complimenting the serial killer. He told Bundy, "Take care of yourself, young man. I say that to you sincerely. Take care of yourself, please. It is an utter tragedy for this court to see such a total waste of humanity as I've experienced in this courtroom. You're a bright young man. You would have made a good lawyer, and I would have loved to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself. I don't feel any animosity toward you. I want you to know that. Once again, take care of yourself." Bundy shocked everyone the day before his execution by agreeing to a final interview with one person, Dr. James Dobson. Dobson was an evangelical campaigner and psychologist who was granted an audience with the serial killer. The 45-minute interview was also taped with Bundy's permission on the condition that the entire conversation would be aired unedited. It was the moment every detective, judge, juror, and victim's family had been waiting for. Bundy finally admitted his guilt. He also blamed his sadistic crimes on pornography. Bundy said, "My experience with pornography that deals on a violent level with sexuality is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of materials." Adding, "Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far." Although many believe that Bundy was once again playing to his audience, Dr. Dobson was vehemently anti-pornography and had campaigned against its public consumption. The day before Bundy's execution, his defense team claimed that the erratic outbursts in the courtroom during his trial for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach proved he was mentally incompetent. If they could prove via a psychological assessment that Bundy had been unfit to stand trial, he would be granted a stay of execution. 3 judges of the United States Court of Appeals had agreed there was insufficient time before the scheduled 7 a.m. execution to assess the appeal. It was then put to a vote, but the appeal was unsuccessful. The total cost of Bundy's numerous murder trials, prison escapes, and his 13 years on death row cost taxpayers an estimated $5 million. Governor Bob Martinez stated, "Justice has been on hold for a decade, and it's about time Ted Bundy paid for his crimes." In his previous interviews on death row that were conducted by Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth for the book Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer, Bundy said he did not feel guilt for his crimes. Bundy told the writers, "Guilt, it's this mechanism we use to control people. It's an illusion. It's a kind of social control mechanism, and it's very unhealthy. It does terrible things to the body. I don't feel guilty for anything. I feel sorry for people who feel guilt." Bundy did not request a special meal before his execution. He instead received a standard meal of medium-rare steak, eggs, toast with butter, coffee, juice, and hash browns. The night before the execution, he spoke twice on the phone with his mother, Louise Bundy. Louise did not attend her son's execution, so journalists traveled to her home in Tacoma, Washington. She told them, "It's a media circus, and we didn't feel the agony we would go through by going down there would compensate for a few minutes talking to Ted through the glass." And he also felt that way too. On January 24, 1989, Bundy had wept and prayed all night in his prison cell. The day of his execution had finally arrived. A last thick strap was pulled across Bundy's mouth and chin. The metal skull cap was bolted in place, its heavy black veil falling in front of the condemned man's face. An anonymous executioner pushed the button. 2,000 volts surged through the wires. Bundy's body tensed and his hands tightened into a clench. A tiny puff of smoke lifted from his right leg. A minute later, the machine was turned off and Bundy went limp. A paramedic opened the blue shirt and listened for a heartbeat. A second doctor aimed a light into his eyes. At 7:16 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy, one of the most active killers of all time, was pronounced dead. A crowd of 2,000 spectators gathered outside Florida State Prison to celebrate the execution of the notorious serial killer. Vendors sold T-shirts that read, "Burn Bundy Burn" and "Toast Ted."